All right, a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. I did not make a new assignment for this week. I feel like I let you down.
No, you shouldn't feel like that.
Okay. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I just feel that I want to make sure we have the stuff that we're working on so far down, really solid, and have an opportunity for you to look at the next thing, which is logging in, because many applications have that component in them, right? And they have it for all kinds of reasons, right? When you log in, you get information personal to you. For example, if you log into Canvas, you see your classes. People log into sites in administrator mode to maintain the database. For example, this league database that we have here. More than likely, there would be a couple of sections to this application. There'd be the content management part of it, whereas whoever was the league administrator could log in and add players and add teams and add leagues and so on. And then there'd be everyone else who could just view stuff. So it's a pretty important aspect of it. So I want to make sure we have all this stuff down before we branch off and do other stuff. So I've posted a tutorial, and depending on how it goes today, either today or Thursday, I'd like you to work through that tutorial. So I might just have a shorter lecture today, and you can work on that tutorial or other stuff, or we might do it Thursday. So I'm going to play that by ear. Okay? I honestly don't 100% remember where we left off. Okay? So I'm going to show you, we went through, I think, the basics of databases because people had some questions about that. We were going to look at more ways of putting property attributes on there. I know we were going to do that. We're going to look at a few more examples, but I honestly don't remember exactly where we left off. So let's start off looking at the application we have so far. I'm going to take an informal survey before we begin. Who has had a rough day within the past 3 days, let's say? Okay, wow. You other people that have it, what are you doing? Tell us your secrets. Because yesterday, but you know what the thing is yesterday I knew it was going to be a rough day. So I was prepared for it. And it didn't disappoint. All right? It wasn't one of those days like, oh, I thought it was going to be a rough day, but it was no big deal. I thought it was going to be a rough day, and it was a rougher day than I thought. All right? But the good news is knowing that it is a rough day, I was ready for it, sort of, and I knew all I had to do was survive it. Right? That was my only expectations. It's like, just make it through and you'll be okay, because the rest of the week will be relatively easy. So that's the one advantage of that. I don't know why. It's just a lot of people I know have been having very rough days. There is the whole Mercury in retrograde thing. Is that going on now?
Yes, it is.
I was going to say, someone told me it was going to start last week, and I don't know if that's true or not. And I really don't believe in astrology. But on the other hand, who knows? All right? All right. So the one thing that we looked at was, or I want to look at, is in the model how you can put qualifiers above this to designate additional information about the attributes. I don't think we've looked at this before, all right, which is cool. Places where that's referred to. All right, that can come in handy, especially if you're going to change something. Like if you're going to change the name of something, you might want to go and see where it's referred to or whatever. Or if you were eliminating a column, all right, that would be useful. Let's see. So let's look up some model property attributes. Model attributes. Here we go. This is exactly what I was looking for last time, and I wasn't able to find it. I'm going to post this. Funny thing about this, too, is, a lot of times properties and attributes are like synonyms, right? You talk about a class having attributes or properties. So it's kind of funny to hear them say that this is the attribute of the properties. So it's sort of another way to call this. Sometimes this is called metadata, right? Because it's data about data. If you look in databases, you have metadata, right? Because the data is the column and all that, but information about the column, whether it's a key or not, whether it's indexed or not, that's data about the data. So sometimes it's called metadata. So I'm going to post this anyhow. And this is a good thing to do because the better you can describe this, the better and more precise your database is going to be. So, for example, if it is the key, mark it as a primary key. I think there are some defaults taken. For example, a column called ID, I think it understands that that's the key even without this metadata. A scaffold column, whether the column is going to be used as a field when scaffolding the view. So if there's something that you don't want to show up in your scaffolding, you could put scaffold column false. The display name, a user-friendly label for this property. To specify a different field in the database table for this to map to. I would avoid doing that. It allows you to do that, but that sure doesn't sound a good idea to me. To give a property a name, yet have the database column that relates to something else. That kind of makes me go, ooh, that's like inviting trouble, all right? Because you want things to be as clear as possible. Way of formatting it. This is especially useful for dates, all right? Whether it's a foreign key. There's validation attributes, whether something's required, the maximum length of the string, and so on. So this is a good list of things to do and that you should take into account. This one's good because this one check for duplication and required. Now, to apply remote validation, I think you would actually have to write code on that. Now, this goes back to something that I talked about when talking about databases. This is a model, but it relates to the database. It ties to the database because we're generating our database from this model. So constraints that you build into the database are better than constraints that you implement via your programming, right? So, for example, something that is required. You don't have to put the required attribute on it, right? You don't have to put the required attribute on it. You could write code to do JavaScript validation to make sure that people entered a field, right? So you don't have to write JavaScript validation. The problem is then is you have to get that right every time. Someone's going to have to make sure that they get that right every time. And if they mess up, then you're going to get data in that's invalid. All right? That has a field missing where it shouldn't be missing. That is if you don't implement it in the database and you try to implement it through your code. You know, the uninformed view or the naive view is to say, validation is validation. What difference does it make if I do it on a database, if I write code to do it? If you put it in the database, no one can screw it up. All right? If someone messes up the validation rule, or someone that is responsible for maintaining your programs sometime in the future isn't as good of a programmer as you and says, oh, I'm going to get rid of this code, I don't know what it does, oh, we don't need to validate this, whatever, then they can break your validation like that. Just like, do I have to define something as a foreign key even though it isn't, you know, even though I'm using a drop-down for it? Yes, you should define it as a foreign key because, again, you may have a drop-down where they can only pick a value that corresponds to a value in another table. However, if you don't enforce that in the database, someone could break your code. Whereas if the rule is defined in the database, then no one can get in and validate data. So let's go and let's put some of these things in here. So we'll just pick one of the models. I won't do all the models. But let's pick the model for team. All right? So this is a key. So I'm going to define that as a key. Database generated. This is database generated. All right. Guess it told me. Has anyone run into this problem before? No? Just me? I'm on it. Okay. Using this. Okay, there we go. Not sure why it did not like that the first time around, but it didn't. Database generated. let's look at something else we might want to say. Team name. Oh, database generated. Skip that. That might relate to, I might be confused at what that's relating to, so we'll skip that. Team name we want to be required, so we will go in and define it as required. Let's put in the maximum length of the string. Let's put the actual column name that we want. Or display name rather. And so on. Last but not least, for foreign key, donates property, uses foreign key in a relationship. There is no argument. Parameter name. Let's see. So for that, we have to supply a table and a column name. should work. All right, let's see if that is correct. So let's go and create our database. And I can add migration November 5th. I could go get a cup of coffee. Start reading a long novel. All right. Then I can say update database. And if we then look at the database in the viewer, we should see everything in there correctly. So SQL Object Explorer, that's the actual database. We go into no foreign key.
Wasn't in league.
Pardon me?
Wasn't it in league?
Is it in? It was in team. Or was it in league? Huh. Well, I'm not sure what I did wrong there, but it should create the foreign key. In team. It created the foreign key to league. My guess is it was looking for a field called league ID. I think we have to specify the field name. So maybe it's league ID. I'm not sure. Doesn't like that. Doesn't like that. Okay, not sure what I'm doing wrong here. The bottom line is, you rather than sitting here researching it, take a look through the documentation and see if you can find what you need to do for the foreign key. All right. One of the things that we wanted to talk about is saving data, because it's kind of a pain to go in and create data each time. This is actually bugging me now. So let's go. Did they have you do this in a tutorial, do you recall? Let's look. No, because there was only one table in the tutorial. foreign key used to specify the foreign key.
Do you have to point to the table?
Yeah, that's what I thought I was doing with this.
I thought that's pointing to the field.
Display team name.
No, that's the right one. It's underneath.
Oh. Expecting a string called name. So let's look at the examples again. Category ID. How do you say what table though? That right there.
Looks like they had something separate to define that it was a foreign key because they didn't have it on the public and like you're trying to put it on. They had it on the public virtual and then they had the table name and the category.
Okay. I'll tell you what, I will investigate this and I'll post the results for this. Because I don't want to spend the whole time worrying about this. All right, so I'll do some research and I'll post the corrected version of this when I get when I get some time to work on it, because I don't want to spend hours working on this. All right, so saving data. Let's look at the tutorial because I know the tutorial addressed that. The database, I think that's where it is. And we did this much, seed the database. Create a new class called seed data with the following code. All right. So we won't actually do this, we'll just look at it because I don't feel like doing all the alterations for it. But you can seed data simply by going in and duplicating this code, which you saw in the tutorial, that goes in and if there's any movies, in this case, it will return without putting any data in. But if there is not any movies, it'll go and add these movies to the database. All right, and then you can put in program CS, add the main method to go and actually run the seed data to actually go and do that. Did anyone have trouble with that? If you had trouble with that, we can talk about it in lab. All right. That's really up to you whether you need to do it or not. I don't require it. If you're testing with a lot of data that you want to have every time you run it, it's probably a good idea to go and do that. If you're just talking about putting in a few rows in the database, then you can just manually enter them each time. Okay. One thing I wanted to look at is, let's go and run this. Let's put a few pieces of data in. If when I'm demonstrating something, there's something that you don't follow, please bring it to my attention. We'll take a look at it. I'm just going to enter in a league, couple leagues, a couple teams. There should be a drop down for here, obviously. I didn't do this example. Okay, so we had that. Now, all that is basically scaffolding with a little bit with the drop down in. I then have a roster section where I can pick the league, do a search. It shows me the list of teams in that league. I can pick the team and see the roster. Okay. Any questions on how I did this? Did we look at this last time? One question I know someone had is on this page, when we pick the league, we should show the league because it's showing the team and the league ID, but it's not showing what league that actually is. Likewise, if I pick a team, it shows me the team ID, but it doesn't show me the team name. In addition, there might be other information we would want to show about the team or the league. All right, so let's go and let's add that capability. And I'll just do one of them. I'll put on the team roster, I'll put the information about the team. Okay, now, here's the way I think of this, because I'm still a novice with this, as you can tell by my foreign key confusion. All right. That is like, what scaffolding page does this? All right, because I want to copy and paste code. All right, even when I wouldn't be surprised if every program I've ever written contains stuff from the first program I ever written. It just got copied and pasted in a million times. All right. I want to show on this the team information. Well, what page do I have that shows me a single team? All right. So I want to see a single team, the team whose ID is up on the query string. All right. The details page does that. The details page shows me the single team with the single with information about a single team on the query string. So let's go and let's say, okay, teams details, that's what I want to copy here. So I'm going to go to teams details. And I'm going to start by copying the model. All right, the model has that in there. We probably don't need that. The model has a public team, getting set. And I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put that in my team roster page. The model for it, that is. So now I have, yep, there's a team that's going to come from here. I actually don't like the fact that they stagger. I like all the attributes at the very beginning. All right. So what does details team do in the model? Well, on the async get task, if ID is null, it returns not found. What is that for? What does ID null, return not found do? It does this. Okay? There's supposed to be an ID in the query string. Let's go to a team details page. Supposed to be an ID in the query string. What if some smart Alex says, I'm going to get rid of that ID. Let's see what happens. Tells me that the web page can't be found. All right, which makes sense because you can't show team details unless you supply the team. So when you're passing stuff on the query string, you have to be cognizant that it's possible for people possibly to try to manipulate that. Just like we could have someone say, oh, what happens if I do this? Get the same thing. So that's what we have going on in here. Hey, if there's no ID, in fact, I'm going to go and just copy this code. In my roster model. It actually already does that, right? So I can remove this because it already does that. I can put this here, cut this. So I'm only going to do this if the team ID is not null. I'm going to pull the team, give me the first or default, or the team ID equals ID. Now, the one thing I did is I made ID team ID. So I'm going to change that to match. To match. All right. So, if the team ID on the query string is null, so some wise guy tries to pull up that page without having an ID there. All right. It's going to give me an error. All right. It's going to redirect to that. If I try to retrieve that team and that team is non-existent, it's going to give me the not found error. Finally, if all those things are okay, it's going to go and it's going to retrieve all the players for that team. All right? Everyone clear what it's doing here? First or default, typically a select statement returns more than one thing, right? Let me rephrase that. A select statement has the potential to return more than one thing. If I say select star from players, or even if I say select star from players where team ID equals something, it could return more than one player. So sort of by default, the assumption is that a select can return multiple things. It can return a list. However, we know because of our vast knowledge of databases, all right, if we select using the primary key, at most we're going to get one, right? That's why we have a different select command if we're only going to be pulling one thing. All right, makes sense? Because we don't want to go through the whole rigmarole of, we could actually write this code exactly like we wrote the code to search the players. The difference is we'd always get a list of 1 or 0. All right? Would always get a list of 1 or 0. Would never get 2 teams with the same team ID. So the fact that we would retrieve a list would be sort of redundant. All right? Sort of a waste of time. So we're going to instead use first or default. And let me go and pull up a description of what that means. But in a nutshell, it's saying, hey, just give me the first thing. We sort of give the database a wink, saying, well, the first thing is going to be the only thing. Returns the first element of a sequence, or default value if it contains no elements. So it's only going to give me one thing, but that's okay. There's only going to be one thing that matches that team ID. So it's giving us everything by giving us the first thing. Or by some fluke, like if someone types in the URL a team ID that doesn't exist, it won't get anything. In which case, team is going to be null. And we can say that that team was not found. All right, so we took care of the model. We are supplying the data. We have our team object up here, and we are filling that team object when we go to this page. Now what we have to do is display it, and that ought to be pretty easy. How do we display it? Well, can display something like that, right? Oh, we don't want the league ID. We want the team name. So let's grab the team name. Actually, let's grab these two things. And we'll put them in the CSS HTML file. And I'm going to put them inside of a H2 tag. So inside the H2 tag, we're going to get the display name for team name, which is going to be team space name, and then we're going to get the actual value of the team name. Excuse me. So I select a league, go here, select a team name, roster name, team A. All right, I'm feeling confident today. I actually don't like to, it's obvious that that's the team name, so I'm going to get rid of this. Here's a challenge I want you to think about for a minute. I'm just going to get rid of the label team name. What if I wanted to display the league name here? All right. I want to display the league name here. All right. Let's think about it for a minute, and then let's talk about it, right? Because if I'm displaying a player, the player has a team, right? The team has a league. So we should be able to say that this is Team A, is part of League 1, and here's a list of players that belong in it. Okay? So, we're going to have to make changes in two places, right? We're going to have to make changes in the model for the page, and we're going to have to make changes in the page itself, in the Razor page. I'm going to call them the page model and the entity model, by the way. The entity model is where we define all the entities. The page model is the model that's associated with a particular page. So I'm going to have to change the page model to retrieve the proper league. And I'm going to have to change the, I don't have to change the entity models at all the data's there. I have to change the Razor page itself to pull the league. So, displaying the league name is going to be easy. It's going to be this. Give me a little error, right? Why does it give me an error? Because I haven't changed the model yet. Very good. It's called league, by the way. So let's go in and let's change the model to display the league. All right? So, let's think about what we're doing here. All right. We're almost going to have the exact same thing, right? Except with the league. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to create an attribute for league. I am liking this new version of ASP.NET. even though, of course, there's a learning curve associated with it. It's pretty cool. So I can pretty much copy this, right? Okay. So this is going to be league. This is going to be league. Context league. First or default, MID equals team ID. We don't want to pull up the league who matches the team ID in the query string, do we? That's what team ID is. Team ID is the value that got passed in on the query string. All right? Because it's on the get. On the get, we have a team ID field. It's optional, so it might not get it. But if we get it, it's going to be on the query string. We don't want the league that corresponds to the team ID, right? Because team 1 might not be in league 1. Team 1 could be in team 2. What do we want? We want the league that corresponds to the team's league ID. All right? So what do you think we're going to change this to? League ID. Let's see. Squiggly line. Doesn't know what league ID is. But you're definitely on the right track, right? It has to be the league ID. Where's the league ID coming from? It's coming from the team that we just retrieved. So therefore, we're going to say, give me the team's league ID. All right? So now, when we go and display this, go to the roster, pick a league, go, pick a team, League A, Team A, there's the roster. We go back here, we pick this, League A, Team B, there's the roster. So you see how all these components are hooked together, and that's why I said the scaffolding almost is like creating a tutorial for you, right? Because it shows you how to do this stuff. All you have to do is remember what's done on each page and figure out, if I want to pull up one row from a database, this is what I want to do. If I want to pull up a list of rows from a database, this is what I do. All right? Questions about this? Okay? I'm going to end now, a little bit early. Thursday we will work together in lab, or you'll work individually in lab, but we'll go to lab and you'll work on the login tutorial. All right? Keep your eyes open. I will post to Canvas when I get the whole foreign key thing taken care of. All right? And we'll see you in lab. I'll go open the lab. I'll come back here to get my file.